right now. Okay, so we're recording. Hi, everybody. This is a Friday, and it is, I don't even know what day it is, May 15th, 2020. So welcome to the CAPZ office hours. Yeah, so let's get started. Let's start with open discussion items. And then, wow, Cecile, you do have a lot today. And then we'll go into the project board. And I might add a couple of things at the end too. So Cecile, do you want to take it away?
You're breaking at Ria.
No. Okay. Cecile, go for it. I'm currently in a cabin, in Ralph's cabin, if no one can understand.
Okay. So the first thing is I just wanted to call out that 0.4.3 release is out. And this one includes a bunch of goodies and features from different contributors. I'm really excited about that. And just a few, but I'm probably going to forget some. There's Azure Machine Pools in there, failure domains, managed system, system assigned managed identity, and yeah, that's all I can remember right now. But you should check it out and try it out and let us know if you find anything. Any questions?
Do we have templates that kind of outline all of the kind of potential features?
Yes, great question. So if you look under the release, there are assets that come with the release. And there are actually a few template flavors. So you know how it says cluster-template-. So there's one for machine pool, one for system assigned identity. And those are actually all auto-generated from the flavors directories inside the templates directory using customize. So if you want to create a cluster with those, you would do cluster cuddle config cluster -- flavor, and then put like whatever comes after cluster template. So flavor machine pool, for example.
Okay. Really excited to check out the machine pools.
All right, so Cecile, you have the next one with Ace, right?
Yeah, so that was the good news, and now I have a little bit of bad news. We found a bug yesterday where there's actually a problem in how we were defining the webhooks, and there was a missing plural in 2 places, which caused us to enable webhook for Azure Machine and Azure Cluster, but not Azure Machines and Azure Clusters, which doesn't work. And so took a bit of time to find like why that was happening and some debugging, but thank you, Ace, for helping find the solution. I don't think he's here, but he actually opened the PR to fix it. And so that PR just merged, I believe. So I think I'm going to cut a release to get that out because that's pretty critical, unless there are any objections.
Cool, that sounds good. Thanks for catching that. Let's move on. Cool. So Richard, failure domain, need to change the logic question mark.
Yeah, it's more of a question. I don't know if I put it in there, so I don't know if I've got it right. I was thinking about this. Essentially, the way the logic stands currently is it will take the failure domain from the machine first. If it's not there, then it will take it from the Azure machine, and then lastly, it will take it from the availability zone. But the way I was thinking is that the failure domain on the machine will always be set if we're running in a region that supports availability zones, so it doesn't matter, or it will ignore everything that is in the Azure machine or in the deprecated availability zone. So I'm wondering whether we change the order to take it from, say, the Azure machine first, and then if not, fall back to the machine, because machine will always be set. If that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, that feels right.
Yeah, and it, well, then it will even flip it completely the opposite way around. So, if people are still using the old availability zone, we don't ignore that in case they've actually changed that from the default, maybe.
What would be a case where you have it set in machine but not Azure machine?
Good question. So it will always be set in machine. It will be set in machine definitely by the controller when we report back the available failure domains. So one of those will be picked by the CAPZ controller. So it will always be set there. But I wonder if someone would then say, well, actually, I don't want it to be in that that availability zone. So then they might think, oh, actually, I'll use the failure domain on the Azure machine to over, thinking they're going to override that, but then it won't actually override it as it currently stands. So I guess there's just a lot of confusion there. I was thinking about this the other day. It's, where do we set that? Feels like we just need to twist, change the precedence the other way around.
Yeah, I think it's fine to do that.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Why is it defined in both places?
It doesn't have to be, actually. So it needs to be defined on the machine, definitely. But does it need to be defined on the Azure machine as well? Potentially not.
Yeah, I'm wondering the same thing. It seems strange that we need it on the Azure machine as well, because you could also overwrite it from the machine spec as a user, right?
Yeah, you could, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is some behavior that changed as we were working on failure domains. If you look in the guide for migrating from Alpha 2 to Alpha 3, there's mention about migrating from failure domains that were previously specified on provider-specific resources, such as Azure Machine. So I think Jason is still out today, but when he's back, hopefully next week, he would be probably one of the right people to ask, or Vince. But I definitely remember Jason making some changes around this.
Cool. I'll raise an issue then and tag him in.
That's good.
Cool.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Yep, thank you. All right, so Cecile, the next one. So V1 Alpha 4 API changes that face the user. Things we should start talking about, CAPZ.
Yeah, also if anyone else has discussion items they want to add in, like feel free to put them before mine. But yeah, I just wanted to bring up that I opened an issue. I think we should start talking about what we want the API to look like when we move to V1 Alpha 4, because there are a few things that, there are fields that are unused or deprecated, but we can't remove them because they're in there, and that would be a breaking change to remove them. And then there's also a few things that right now it's a very flat layer, and as we're adding more things, it's becoming more and more like a big list of things inside like Azure Cluster and Azure Machine Spec. And for example, Nader is working on adding user assigned managed identity. And for that, it requires adding an array of user identities. And because we have VM identity as a string, we have to add it like side by side. So now we have two identity like fields inside Azure Machine Spec that are related to each other, but are like together in one place. And so I'm thinking we should start, thinking about this now and discussing it, so that when the time comes for V1 Alpha 4, we're kind of in a good place where we have a proposal and have a good idea of what we want to do with that. So that's it.
All right, sounds good. Anyone have anything to add?
Just a question, would the intention be to kind of match the ARM APIs, like the ARM groupings as closely as possible?
That's something to discuss in the proposal. I think that would make sense to me. I can see something being like, storage and networking and compute, like separating those, or at least like making some logical groupings behind between those. But again, yeah, that it's open for discussion at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of fields originally there that I kind of lumped in based on what was in the API, and a lot of them weren't used until more recently, right? So like identity is definitely one of them that was kind of there and unused until now. So
Yeah, feel free to comment on the issue if you have any suggestions of how you'd like to see this done.
Do we know when Alpha 4 is kind of expected, or I don't think it's very soon?
No, it's not soon. I can let
Yeah,
Andy answer.
so the approach that we are taking is we want to be fairly slow to get cluster APIs v1 Alpha 4 prepped, because there's a lot of effort into creating a new API version, getting the conversions in place, and all the bits that go along with that. However, providers are free to add new API versions as they want to, and we do have support in the CRDs themselves to indicate that a given cluster API version, like v1 Alpha 3, would work with CAPZ, v1 Alpha 3, and v1 Alpha 4 as an example. So as a provider, you could rev to a new API version before cluster API does. You would still continue to work with the cluster API v1 Alpha 3 contracts, but if you need to make some breaking changes in your APIs, you can.
Well, yeah, that's something we can consider as well.
Cool. Are we good for closing discussion? Not for now. Cool. Awesome. Cecilia, you also have the next one. If you want, I can go next and then we can go to you. Break it up a little.
Go for it.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about specifically where this would go. We're gonna have to start thinking about some other Azure related things that we have to add within CAPZ to make it easier for users to like integrate into the Azure ecosystem. And the first thing would be container monitoring. So that's usually an add-on that's within AKS Engine and within AKS today that's created as an add-on. What I'm wondering is how would we do that in CAPZ, and where would it go? And if this is the right time to start thinking about that, I'll put an issue up too.
so
Cecile or Stephen.
Go, Stephen.
Go ahead.
So David, this kind of, I feel like this goes back to the discussion of that Azure API that's not quite Azure SDK that's not quite the SDK, but a set of useful things, if that makes sense.
Yes. And that conversation is a great conversation to have. In fact, I think I was going to push a button probably today to push that out to the public. So to what Stephen's alluding to is a CRD to Azure Resource Reconciler. It's a experimental project that we've been working on to give us an infrastructure provider for Azure, similar to AWS and GCPs. We had it's really early, but we'd love to start getting some feedback and start getting it in front of folks. And all the source code is going to be open source, so it's all GitHub, and everybody can party on it. And let's make some flowers bloom.
I'm super excited about this.
Awesome. I'm not sure this does too much for the container monitoring question that Ria had brought up, but this definitely starts to go down the path of how do we do like async reconciliation versus like synchronous controller reconcile loops. A lot of the stuff that'll make the controller and CAPZ a little bit easier to deal with. So container monitoring though, sorry to take your show, Ria. Where would these pieces go? Like, where would we want to start adding these things? Because I think there's a bunch of tools that we use internally in Azure, like Node Monitor, Node Health Monitor, the container monitoring, a lot of value that we can add from the platform and probably get it into, I don't know where. Like, how did folks feel about it? Where should we park this kind of stuff?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was alluding to, that I'm not sure that this is something that belongs in CAPZ per se.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Right.
Cecile also has her hand raised.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what Andy thinks about this, because I know there's the proposal on resource set, or like the applying resources to the cluster after deployment that's going on, and there's also cluster add-ons. And I feel like we've been getting this question a lot recently about what do we do with, like add-ons, like things we want to apply on CAPZ clusters that aren't, part of the deployment. And that's going to become a recurring question. So I think we should look at this like more broadly than just container networking or container monitoring, sorry.
Sure. So we have CAPI pull request 3050, which is the cluster resource set proposal. My vision at a high level, and I don't know if this will come to fruition or be modified or just thrown out the door, is that we implement something like what's specified in 3050 to allow people to declaratively define what sort of initial things they'd like to have deployed to clusters. But as we've stated in the proposal, we don't want to replace any sort of add-on management or operators that are out there. So if you have folks who want to deploy clusters on Azure and you need container monitoring added to every cluster or anything else, I think that there's a couple approaches that you could take. One is, like, we know that clusters need CNI installed. And so this proposal would give you an easy way to get CNI installed. And if you also had some sort of container monitoring bundle of YAML, you could use this same mechanism to get that installed. I think what I'd rather see is that this mechanism is considered for like an initial setup. And so you get your CNI installed, ideally along with some sort of operator or something to manage it. And you also install some other tooling like an add-ons manager that can then be configured to get your container monitoring installed, get your backup solution installed, whatever you need to get deployed. And so this is really like a transition point between nothing and cluster add-ons or whatever sort of operators you are working with. So I don't know, I could envision maybe there's like an add-on manager that you could just tell it, I want Azure container monitoring, but you don't have to give it a full, 20 kilobytes of YAML to get that all installed. You just say, I need this container monitoring thing, and it knows how to go find it. So sort of, homebrew based, that type of thing, where in your manifests for your clusters and for your cluster resource sets, you have just enough to get the real stuff installed in the clusters to then go manage add-ons, if that makes sense.
Would you see kind of that initial kind of add-on manager containing the things that you want it to deploy as part of the CRD that is?
So I think it would be nice if we didn't have to have the full definition of every add-on that you want to install in this manifest. So I'd like to reiterate what I said a minute ago. It would be really nice if So let's pretend we have cluster resource set. So in my cluster resource set, I would have a reference to a config map or a secret that does have the actual YAML for a deployment, a daemon set, whatever else, whatever sort of things I want to install. And ideally, I could say just enough YAML in my config map to get CNI installed and an add-on manager installed. And I would also say to the add-on manager, I would like Azure Container Monitoring. I would like Valero for backups. I want Prometheus and Postgres and whatever else that you treat as an add-on. But those would just essentially be like names and versions and maybe a little bit of configuration. But I think it would be nice not to have to specify a giant set of YAML and all the resources for each individual add-on when you're doing that. And this is like pie in the sky vision. I don't have anything written down. Probably should, but that's what I've been thinking about lately.
Would there be any? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say this feels like a Pixie boot, right? That's kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah, sort of.
Would there be any value in kind of, as part of the management cluster, having some sort of mechanism that's maybe not part of cluster API, but that provides kind of a catalog of add-ons that you can then specify within cluster API to kind of pull from?
Sure. I mean, that's kind of what this cluster resource set is, but they're not, like it's loosely defined. Like a cluster resource set can point at one or more config maps or secrets that contain my add-ons, but we're specifically and explicitly not considering this thing to be an add-ons manager, because there's the cluster add-ons subproject that exists that's also part of the cluster lifecycle, and we're not trying to step on their toes or be a replacement for it. It's just, I have a cluster, I need to get some stuff installed initially so that the rest of like the real stuff, the real add-on managers can do their work. So if there's some way to have that collection or catalog in the management cluster that's not a cluster API specific thing, and you figure out how to sync it from the management cluster to the workload clusters, sure, I think we could definitely continue to brainstorm about stuff like that.
Do you know timelines for both of these? Because right now there is no like ready solution, right? And for external cloud provider, what we've done is like just add it as a YAML inside the repo and then just like have it manually applied. So what should we do for now? Is that the...
So for right now, I would say the best thing you can really do is probably just document that users need to go run some kube control commands to get stuff applied after you create clusters. We want to be fairly aggressive on the timeline for the cluster resource set. So we have the proposal open. It's unfortunately not ready for lazy consensus at this point because we still have some design questions that are outstanding that involve some security issues. I highly encourage you to take a look at the proposal. I won't tell you not to comment out the wazoo, but if you could try to reserve your comments for things that are like really big issues or perceived problems or questions, instead of nitpicking every detail like we like to do. We've had this open for comment for a while, so we're just trying to get through the last issues and get it merged. So not telling you not to comment, but I would suggest that the types of comments should have a slightly higher bar than free-for-all, if that's possible.
Where is this RFP?
This is Cluster API pull request 3050. I have it open. I can get you a link in Zoom chat here real quick. Or actually, Stephen did. Well, I'll add it to the doc if, yeah, here we go. It's linked in the meeting notes.
I did not realize I was opening such a big can of worms, but
well, it's good because like we can only design so much based on our preconceived ideas or brainstorming. So the more input we have, the better.
Cool. Yeah, and there's probably going to be, internally, we're going to have some discussions with container monitoring to see like how this stuff would even get exposed, because I'm sure right now, initially, if anyone added a container monitoring add-on to their clusters, it wouldn't look right. So we're just going to have to go manually try that out from that end. And then from this end, I guess we can document it, yeah, through kubectl commands or control commands, and wait for this proposal to go through.
Yeah, and just for like an alternative for what the vSphere provider does, for example, for things like the cloud provider or cloud controller manager and container storage interface, not add-ons, but deployments, it automatically manages installing those into the workload clusters. But I think we're probably going to transition that away from having code do it and tell people you need to go set up a cluster resource set to get these things installed. But we'll see. And I apologize, I have to run to another meeting. So it was nice seeing you all, and have a good weekend.
See ya.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.
Alrighty, so I'll open up an issue so we can just track where it is and kind of the dependencies that we have in cluster API.
Are you seeing some kind of requests for that from internal teams within Microsoft?
No, not yet, just because no one's actually really using CAPZ at its full extent yet. But I see it just down the runway of things that we're gonna start to need to incorporate. I did actually get specifically asked, but this is for some other stuff. So
Okay.
yeah, just for us to become like any sort of viable product, there's just definitely a couple add-ons and a couple things we have to layer on top of these clusters, because it's something natural that our Azure customers use or will ask for. And we also, just being part of Azure, other teams want to make sure like their stuff is still supported. So like we definitely support Prometheus. Like if Prometheus works for you, go use it. But we also want to give people the option, if they are completely in the Azure ecosystem, to be able to use our Azure products really easily.
Oh yeah, and I can definitely iterate that from our side, that we see customers all the time who, even though they're bought into our tool set, they also want to use Azure Monitor. So
That's interesting. Yeah, cool, awesome. So I think we can hold on that one. Cool. The next one, AKS provider PR merged. There's no name on it, so.
Yeah, it's me, and I also want to come back to the one before that we had skipped.
Oh yes, go
yeah.
for it.
So first one is I opened a PR for the etcd data disk cap in cluster API. It's under lazy consensus until I think next Tuesday. Go ahead and review it if you haven't. But basically, it's adding a generic way to add cloud init, disk setup, file system setup, and mounts. So that part is static, is not going to change. The cluster API part, the part that's like still, I mean, a little bit under, I guess not anymore, but still being tested, is the CAPZ integration of how we can reference the device, because it's complicated, but basically the device name isn't persistent on reboot, so we need to use a sync to the device when we create the partition, and then refer to the mount with a file system label. Anyways, that's too much detail for here, but just wanted to say that CAPI PR is under review, and the CAPZ part of it is practically done, but I'll open a prototype PR soon.
Cool.
Are those linked?
Yes, they are. There's links. Oh, you mean the PRs and the design? You're muted.
Just looking for them in the doc.
So yeah, the doc is there. The doc has the prototype links to the branches, and then the PR is open now. So you should comment on the PR if you have comments for the CAP. The link is at the top. Any other questions on that? If not, I'll just go ahead and say the next one too. I just wanted to call out that the AKS provider PR merged. That was a big one that ACES has been working on for a while, and it just merged yesterday. So it's in master. It's not in the latest release, but go ahead and try it out if you're interested.
I'm super interested. So I will be trying it out soon. Cool. Anything else that anyone wants to discuss before we get to the project board? Or comments on the ACAS provider PR wording? Okay. I don't know if it's me cutting out or if the silence is legit. Okay, let's move on. So I'm going to attempt to.
Silence.
Cool. I was like, I don't know if it's me. I'm going to attempt to share my screen while also recording this. I'm only on one screen today, and I've never done this with just one screen. So, hope that worked. Alrighty, so let's get these new cards over and then just double check our to-do column and make sure it makes sense. Alrighty, defaulting in templates for marketplace images. I'm going to put that in the backlog, assuming no one's working on it. Managed cluster should check provisioning status before attempting changes. I'll put it in the backlog until I'm guessing this is Ace. Shows up and says he's working on it. Alrighty, add CI API diff job.
Yeah, those are all PRs.
So I'll put that in progress.
Yep.
Cool. Let's do it. It's a lot. Yay. Managed cluster defaulting webhooks. Assuming that's in the. Ooh, my connection's unstable. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. A little bit.
A little bit. Multi-tenancy managed cluster. Enable reading Azure creds from secret. I'm going to put all the managed cluster stuff in the backlog. Ooh, so much fun stuff. Documentation, yes.
That's also multi-tenancy. Maybe we should put that in to do.
Which one? The enable Azure credential?
Yeah.
I think that one is related to the PR that ACE has open in CAPZ. Oh, I was also going to mention that. There's a PR in CAPZ that's under review to allow, or maybe I'm confusing it. Is that one multi-tenancy?
I can click on it.
You're talking about the getting rid of bootstrap credential secrets?
Yeah, you're right. It is multi-tenancy.
Yeah. Well.
So, yeah, I mean, we can also keep it in backlog just because I think managed cluster is like the priorities to get it done for non-managed clusters, and then this one is more like a to-do after since it's still experimental. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we haven't really, until we get someone working on it or assigned to it, I'm fine keeping it in the backlog just because I don't know if it's going to get worked on otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I do like the ability to deploy AKS clusters. I think kind of focusing on clusters that are fully managed by CAPZ is going to be priority.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so PRs for adding support for in-progress VMs, for spot VMs. Control plane S3 does not open SSH.
That one should stay in under review. Yeah, it was
in review in progress. Oh,
progress.
sorry, I just like moved it over. Cool. what did I just move?
I think Spot was also
Sloppy, yes.
with you.
I was just like, oh, it's a PR. No, it's in another column. I don't have my widescreen today. Things are harder. Thanks. Okay, EWE test. I'm just gonna keep moving these guys. No. Just 1 second. It's way easier when I had my widescreen. Okay. Refactor. Services do not return interfaces. So I'm assuming the backlog works. CAPZ cluster cuddle test framework.
Yeah, this is all backlog.
Cool.
Except this.
Boot diagnostics. Bootstrap failure detection.
I think we might want to consider putting that into do.
Okay.
We can discuss.
Nader's assigned to it, so.
Oh, okay, great. So yeah, I guess even more reason.
I just assigned myself to it today, but I haven't started yet.
Do you want
I
us
can
to
still
put
make
it
it.
into do? Do you think it's something that would happen in the next couple of weeks or
I don't.
or a
I
month or
don't
two?
know exactly what has to happen in it. I know there's some discussions with like the AWS folks that were also working on it. So yeah, if
Okay.
it's like figured out, I can start working on it.
Okay, we'll put it in the backlog and maybe in a week or two that'll change. Provide deadlines or cancellations for all uses of context.context. David, is that yours?
That's backlog.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's going to go. There's wide-ranging changes for that. We need a design proposal, I think.
For the
Gotcha.
context ones?
So there's going to be plumbing all the way down. So like even like patch object has a context call, and we like in our scopes end up saying, hey, let's instantiate a patch object, and then we call patch, and we don't pass a context down to it. So there's a lot of plumbing all the way down,
Yeah.
right? So if we want to really have hierarchical context all the way down, so if like say we say a reconcile loop can only take 60 seconds, and we get all the way down into a patch call, and the patch call doesn't have a relationship to that higher level context, then the patch call could run indefinitely and then eventually freeze the loop.
Dig it.
Ugly. To close out on that, the actual like design discussion, and maybe it doesn't have to be a proposal doc, but more just like, hey, what is our philosophy on how long a reconcile loop can run? Like, do we have like a time that we're going to terminate and say, hey, you're done, let's try another at some point, you're failed?
That's an interesting question.
I think that also ties into the whole, like, do we do the whole cluster creation in one loop thing? So that's what we're doing. And so we have to be very lenient on how long the reconcile loop can take. But if we don't do that, then it should be shorter.
Is that something a user could eventually configure? Like, could we make that configurable, or is that something that shouldn't ever be configurable?
Ideally, we don't have a user configure it. I think is the current one like 10 minutes or something?
It's indefinite.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so it leads off with context.todo.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, I could have swore we plumbed that at some point, but I guess not. Yay, to do.
I wanted to ask Stephen, actually, last time when we did the triage, we were thinking about whether we should archive the stuff in done, because we have this big done column, which is supposed to be Q1, but we're past Q1 now. But also, does it really make sense to track stuff by timeline and not by milestone?
It depends. So right now the board has automated as done configured for that column. So like we could just create another column and reconfigure it as automated as done. The reason I was doing that at the time, at least, was that there was less activity in the repo. So at least scoping it by quarter made sense. The milestones, we could do milestones. I think we also had multiple milestones that were like, one was like infra or something, like not necessarily code-based milestones, but also like plumbing. So yeah, I'm fine to go to milestones if it makes sense now. This was just what worked at the time. So.
Yeah, we could also just add a Q2 column and start putting done in there. That works too. The other thing about milestone is that I think we went too big for this one, as in we said, July, and then we were also planning on that being V1 Alpha 4, but now V1 Alpha 4 isn't July anymore. And so now we have this like ongoing milestone that's probably going to last a while. And I feel like it makes more sense to have smaller scopes milestones, multiple ones, right? Because we're only tracking 0.5, which I think CAPZ is putting stuff in 0.3.6 and like doing patch releases or patch milestones, I guess.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine to do that. I think that also goes into the discussion of like where or when we shift APIs, right? So what Andy was saying earlier. So yeah, I mean, I'm fine either way. I think as long as it gives people a good visibility into what we're doing, then flexible.
Okay. I think the done column would be more helpful if it was scoped to milestones, but as Cecile was talking about, the milestones are probably too big right now. And that's okay, we can adjust it.
So yeah, one thing about that is like once a PR merges, like or closes, or an issue closes, right now the milestone applier will automatically apply some milestone, right? So the milestones are fine. We don't necessarily need to track. What we could, like if someone is interested in seeing what milestone something landed in, they could filter by milestone on the board. And you'd not only be able to see the milestone, you'd also be able to see what quarter it was done in, right?
Gotcha.
So you could filter that way, but just be aware that like when something merges, it's going to go into whatever the automated as done column is. So.
Yeah. Okay, then maybe we just create another done column and archive these guys.
Or you can just keep these guys on here even.
Yeah, and
if
add
there's
another
a second column, it's fine. Just put it towards the right.
It's gonna get unwieldy. But
it's gonna be harder for you to drag stuff to backlog.
Yeah, it's gonna get, but that's fine. I mean, when I have my widescreen, it doesn't matter. But today it matters.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the behavior is for archive, for archiving all the cards. So I usually just drag the newest milestone to the front or to the front of the done columns, right?
Okay, so I can just go ahead and say make a column here. Oh God, what was the other one? Let's see, 2020 Q1. Are we in Q2?
Yes, we're about to exit it.
Oh.
No, well, we've got a little time, but it also depends on like, are we talking calendar year quarters or are we talking fiscal year? So yeah, calendar year wise, we've got a month and change for Q2.
I just thought of something, both David and Cecile, that I wanted to get your feedback on. This is related to the Azure Sovereign support issue. So David responded with 3 points, which I agree entirely on. The one piece that I wasn't sure about was environment name to environment translation. You had said that should go in or I think someone had said that should go in CAPZ, but when I'm looking at it, it feels like all of the other conversions from environment name to environment happen within Go auto rest. And it feels like a scope creep of CAPZ into Go auto rest's territory.
I think one of the main reasons why I think the main reason why it was pushed to kind of go down that way is we have a lot more direct control. And if there's any sort of changes that need to take place to that logic, we will be able to make those changes much quicker in CAPZ. Would they be better in Go auto rest in the long term? Perhaps. In fact, I agree with you. I do think that they would be better served to be in Go auto rest in the long term. The responsiveness that you will receive there is going to be less than we are able to provide.
I'm just thinking where, like, we were talking about primarily using the environment name lookup and then falling back to a file to provide the details. And that functionality already exists in Go auto rest. It doesn't use the metadata lookup that we talked about. So I'm just wondering is it really worth to build out the environment name to environment mapping in CAPZ just to add the functionality of the metadata lookup?
So I can field this since I left that comment actually. Yeah, so no, I don't think we should be statically remapping the existing Go auto rest environments. The main scenario where this is relevant is for custom cloud scenarios, exactly. So we just want to make sure that we do have support for those environments. And I think one of the issues that maybe I can clarify offline is that the Go auto rest like environment struct does not actually reflect all of the endpoints that you need in a custom environment.
Yep.
So that's where I was saying that we can't rely directly on what they have. We actually need to extend it a little bit. But I think for now, what you have in that issue looks good. I can clarify those details offline and maybe comment on the issue.
Okay, that's awesome.
All right. Is there anything else you want to discuss? Otherwise, I'm just going to go through to-do really quickly. Okay, let's just take a quick look at to-do and make sure it makes sense. Nothing needs to go to the backlog. If you see something, call it out. Okay, and there's nothing in the backlog that we should move over. If you're working on something, please call it out and let me know. But these look like, yeah, we're not. GPU nodes.
Yeah, I think we should unassign. So Sertash, who's assigned right now, did a bit of research and wrote down some steps to do this manually. And there is an operator for NVIDIA, but the problem is that it doesn't support containerd right now, so we can't use it. But I think this is still backlog. We were just did some initial, like how much work would be needed research.
Is it okay if we keep Sertash assigned, or do you want me to take him off? I don't think I can take people off.
Yeah, well, I'll ask him. Yeah.
Okay. Oh my goodness, Zoom, go away. Okay, cool. Nice. Sovereign clouds. Fail fast and coda is not sufficient. I don't know if there's, oh my God, I'm going to his page. If there is any like progress in that, but that's fine, we can keep it. Okay. Cool. I think everything seems good if everyone else feels like it does.
Yeah. Please, do you want to show off your triage tool thing?
I just shared it there for context. I feel like the labels don't make a lot of sense right now, but yeah, you can take a look at it if you want. I set up triage party for CAPZ. I just sent it in the chat. So I can link the config as well. So people can play with it, because I don't think it makes a ton of sense right now, but I basically just have a branch sending to the chat, and it's hard coded to the generic Kubernetes config there.
So we're also, I think what I'd eventually like to do is, I was going to suggest triage party and then boom. Like, I think what I'd eventually like to do is allow multiple versions of triage or like multiple instances of triage party on the Kubernetes level. Like we're testing it out for SIG release.
Oh,
So
I have 3 already.
right now. Huh?
I have 3 for controller runtime, CAPI, and CAPZ. So.
Nice. Yeah, it'd be nice to be able to deploy all of those in one place and then swap configs easily. So maybe we can, if you want to get up with me later, maybe next week, and then so Marky is working on that in SIG release, and then I think so. Thomas did a demo for us, I think both on the SIG chairs meeting as well as within the release engineering meeting. So yeah, I would like to see this work for a lot of people, because I'm also working on other triage related things for KK. So yeah, let's definitely chat about it.
Oh yeah, just let me know.
Cool. Okay. Anything else? Cool. Alrighty. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. See you guys in 2 weeks. And yeah, as always, see you guys on the interwebs.
Talk to you later.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Later.
Bye bye.